Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the 12th District and beyond. This is your State Representative cary-condotta here in the House of Representatives, back with you with an update for this week. Well, we're 2/3 of the way through the session, and we're into the point of talking about budgets. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to. That's what's going to get us out of here either on time or not on time. And because there's not a lot else going on except the budgets, I want to review a few things with you, some facts that maybe you haven't heard, because there's a lot of talk over here about needing additional revenue. Really? Let's just remember in the forecast, in the revenue forecast, that revenue was up over 8%. Now the inflation rate, even in Seattle, is 1.9%. And given the rate of increase in population, guess what? Revenue is still outpacing both population and inflation by a good margin. So the fact is we have over $2 billion more to spend than we had in the last biennium. And actually, if the revenues continue to increase at their current pace, it won't be long, actually maybe within this biennium, that we have the highest level of revenue ever in the state of Washington. So do we really have a revenue problem? Do we really need to raise taxes? Good question. Now, the courts have said we need to spend more on education, but to me that's a bit of a prioritization issue. Perhaps we need to make that first priority and look at some other things that aren't quite as important. Because if we raise revenue, where do we raise it? Do we raise the sales tax? That's not going to be easy on a lot of folks. It really isn't. Do we raise the B&O tax? Business already pays substantially more in this state than any other state west of the Mississippi. That's right. So we're already carrying a big burden. And guess what? When you put more tax on the business guys, less jobs, and that's just the way it works. And of course, with property taxes, we still have housing issues, we still have repossessions, we still have a lot of pressure on the real estate market. Not a good time to raise property taxes. So where do you turn? To exemptions? Well, the two big exemptions are food and Boeing. I don't think you're going to touch either one of those right now. One of the other things you should know is that while revenue has outpaced both population and inflation, and actually increased at a fairly substantial rate, jobs have not. If the jobs had come back to the level of '07 where the revenue is, we'd have even more revenue to spend. That's a fact. We're now back to where '07 was in revenue, which was a record, and yet the jobs have not come back. Only about half of them have come back from the '07 position. And so we have this interesting situation in that the economy is not as healthy as it looks. And let's also be careful of how we watch the headlines and what's going on, because really Seattle is very busy. It's ahead of the national curve, no doubt about it. Seattle's looking good thanks to Boeing and Microsoft and a few other legacy companies. The unemployment rate in that area is 5.9%. But what is it outside of Seattle? 8.7% in the rest of the state. So the rest of the state hasn't seen the recovery, or at least the economic boom that, to some effect, that Seattle's seen. And their real estate values are increasing while the rest is remaining fairly steady. So while we hope some of this transmits across the state, right now it hasn't. It's not a good time to raise revenue. We're not there. You're not into the recovery. And so we've got some work to do to balance this budget in hopes the next few years will get better. This is cary-condotta. We'll see you next week with another update.